Greetings from Sabil. Greetings, friends. Thank you for being with us in another Sabil meeting, another Kumi Now meeting. It's a pleasure for me to be always to be part of these meetings. Many of you are friends and committed members of not only of Sabil and Kumi Now, but also of the solidarity movement when it comes with the work that is related for justice and peace in Palestine and Israel. Today we have, like every week, I always use the same introduction. We have a special guest, but this guest today is genuinely, if I might say, is more special, at least for me and for many Palestinians. If we might use a name or a familiar face for most Palestinians to connect the solidarity movements around the world, it is definitely Rachel Corrie. I remember I was a university student when the news came out. I was studying at an American university in Athens, Greece, and it was such shocking news. I remember I was in at the dorms of the school, and maybe there were like 30 students, and I mean, it's the news, the breaking news came on an Arabic channel that we were watching, and it was shocking for all of us. Thank you, Cindy. I know that it is it's very early morning for you, so good morning and thank you for being with us. Can we check? Can we check, please, that the mic is working?
Excuse me. Yes, I'm glad to be here with you, and I appreciated the call earlier to remind me about this morning. And it is early, but it's a beautiful morning here in Olympia, Washington, where I am, and I'm very glad to be with you.
Thank you very much. And today we have a special guest also from Sabil. It's a new staff person who's going to be also helping us with the work of Sabil in general, but also specifically with Kumi. Samuel Munayir. He has already published many of his work, and he's a very committed Palestinian Christian here in Jerusalem. And he's also a professional swimmer. Samuel, are you with us?
Yes, greetings to everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very new to Sabil. This is my, I think, 4th week. I accompanied a youth group or a young adult group all around Palestine last week, which was very successful. So I'm very happy to be here, and I guess I will be seeing a lot of your faces again next week, as I'll be helping with Kumi.
Thank you, Sam. I mean, Sam just started at Sabil like in the middle of last month, around the middle of last month, and he's already a special person and a person with many gifts. Cindy, it's the tradition of Kumi Now is that the speakers introduce themselves. And in a way, can you please introduce yourself? Although I know that many of the people who are already in the meeting have met you. I met you personally. For sure you don't remember, at the Sabil office, maybe like 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So I'm sure you don't remember, but I know that you know many of the people who are also in the meeting. And could you please also introduce the foundation that you have? That is okay.
Yes, well, I'm Cindy Corrie. I'm the mother of Rachel Corrie. As you mentioned, Rachel was killed over 20 years ago now. It's amazing what happens with time. And of course, that was a transforming moment, and in my life, in my family's life. And we were really blessed that given what we were dealing with, that it was also a time when we were able to make some choices about our direction. And so in the course of the 20 years, very quickly, actually, we founded the Rachel Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice, which is based here in Olympia, Washington. It's a nonprofit, a small nonprofit here in the US. And in many different ways, that has become our life. We were mentored and we were supported in so many ways by some people that I see right here on this call through the years. And with the support of so many other people, with many organizations, we were able to find work that we could do and contribute to working, toward some resolution of this situation and to support the Palestinian people in their quest for freedom and for human rights. And we continue that work in different ways. It's changed a lot through the years. The focus has changed, but we do continue that work. And my husband and I, Craig and I are getting much older, so we look for ways to pass it on. But the work goes on day after day, as I know it does for the group that's gathered here. I hope that's an adequate introduction.
It is. Thank you very much, Cindy. I mean, it's yes, I can't believe that it has been, over 20 years since the murder of Rachel. Could you please it is the people who are familiar with the story. We live on a very big planet, unfortunately, with a very big, with plenty of problems. And the US by itself is a huge country with so many different states. How did your family and Rachel got introduced to Palestine, and that there was an issue, a cause that was taking place?
Our families understanding, our connection at the time was very limited because, as I've told people, I read to Rachel about the Holocaust, about Anne Frank, but that was the narrative that we really knew as a family. And I think that the entire situation was it was just that problem out there that was never going to be fixed. And so it was very easy to tune out in the news when word of something happening came, and it was Rachel really who brought us to the issue. And she after 9/11 here and 9/11 here in the US, the community responded with peace initiatives, really, because there were new groups formed for Olympians for Peace in the Middle East. And Rachel connected with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which had always had a presence here, and in trying to think about why had this happened. And one of the ideas that was posed at the time was that the Palestinian issue had something to do with that. And then later in 2002, after the International Solidarity Movement was formed, some of her friends traveled to Palestine at that time to be a part of that. And when they came back and told their stories and talked about the need during that period for there to be witnesses there, it was something that resonated with her. And so Craig and I, my husband and I, were living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. Rachel was here in Olympia going to school at the Evergreen State College. And we were not aware really of how closely tied she was to this. I remember when she kind of broke the news that she was thinking about going there. And it was, a bit startling. And I started to do reading then, and tried to encourage her actually to do something else. We have relatives in India, and I thought maybe she could go there and do some work there, and there'd be people that she could connect with who could be a support. But then it became very clear that she wanted to make this journey. So she really provided our introduction. She sent me a book about by Amira Haas, Drinking the Sea at Gaza. and pointed me to things to read on the internet, and really started our education. And then, of course, once, and she was very committed to going to Gaza. She was told that, by her colleagues, that was where the need was greatest. And so she very intentionally made that choice. She did a lot of educating. She connected with people here in Olympia on the Evergreen faculty who had spent time in the West Bank. And also a friend had gone to Gaza. So she was doing everything she could to prepare for that journey. But she brought the issue to us. And I'm really grateful, given what happened, that I had the time to read and learn myself before she went and while she was there, because I think our response would have been much more difficult if she hadn't guided that preparation for us.
I started working at Sabil in 2006, and the main part of the work that I used to do is help prepare for witness visits, people who are coming into the country, and doing certain programs similar to what Sam did, like young adult conferences and training young people, internationals and locals also. And it was remarkable, wherever I went, people knew Rachel from, not because of after her death, the people who met her before in preparation. In a way, it was really touching, because you were not speaking about an ordinary person. I mean, every person is special, but she was like more special in a way that you felt that somehow she's like a prophet, like we're reading about the coming or a person who was a prophet. And even with the material that was provided and the stories and the people who have encountered her. I mean, for me, it's just meeting you and speaking to you. I just want to say that your daughter is very much alive here in Palestine with so many people. And I mean, the first time I met her was in 2006 in one of our first conferences where people were talking about her. And just to think about how much she touched a small country here in Palestine and so many influential. Was this the same case within her community before she came to Palestine?
Certainly, her story still resonates with people here in Olympia. As the years go on, there are more and more people who don't know the story here, and there's a whole new generation of young people. And so, through the work that we're doing, I would say our goal is not so much to keep Rachel's story alive, but to make sure that that we're doing what she would want to do to make sure that people prioritize this issue and find ways to respond to it. And yes, I would say that here in Olympia, here in Washington State, certainly in Western Washington, Seattle, and so forth, people know the story, and sometimes it's remarkable when I hear from people, not just from here, but around the world still. I have more messages to respond to than I can keep up with from people for whom the story still resonates and provides some inspiration, I guess. Rachel would be very humbled by what you've shared. She wouldn't consider herself an exceptional person at all. And we think of her just as our kid still. And it's I think people understand this. When I see her now 40-some-year, almost 50-year-old friends, that's a reminder about what she might have grown into and what stage she'd be in her life and so forth. But yes, I'm grateful to you to sharing with me that the story still has an impact, because I think it does speak to the compassion that she felt for people in situations like this, but also to her personal need, just to be able to have a meaningful way at the stage that she was in her life to respond to some of what was happening.
And to our understanding, I mean, in the US, that it also caught the attention of media to what was happening, I mean, in Palestine, in a way. People, I mean, it's having a young American person being, I mean, killed in Palestine. Theoretically, at least, of what people expect is that this would have raised the attention of the decision makers in the US, similar to what we had also with Shireen Abu Akleh and other American Palestinian citizens, that usually the country demands. I mean, the US is not any country, it's like the superpower. Demand an explanation, what would have, what happened, and would demand an investigation, and also would hold the people accountable, at least. Could you please tell the people who are not aware about the details, what has been the follow-up from the US part regarding the case of Rachel?
Mm-hmm. A good part of our journey was spent seeking accountability from the Israeli government for what happened, and also from Caterpillar Corporation. If you remember, she was killed by a militarized D9R Caterpillar bulldozer. So we spent years pursuing accountability. It was particularly my husband, Craig, also our daughter Sarah, really gave a decade of her life to pursuing that. And also members of our family, but also people throughout the US and world, I think. But if people, some of you will remember, we were very fortunate in our congressman at the time, Brian Baird. And he, Craig and I had actually worked on his campaign. He didn't know us personally, I don't think, but we had talked to him a couple of times. And I actually visited his office 1 week before Rachel was killed, about a week. I went to Washington, D.C. for my first big protest ever because of the war coming with Iraq. Our family had opposed that. Rachel had opposed it and worked actively to oppose it here in Olympia before she traveled to Palestine. And I was living, Craig and I, because of a job change, were in North Carolina at the time. So I hopped on a train, went to DC, was a code pink on the White House, the last march. And since I was there, I had never lobbied in Congress or anything, but I came in from visiting a friend, nearby friend, after the weekend, and decided I had to go to congressional offices because Rachel was telling us all the things she was seeing. And I had read a Christian Science Monitor article about the need for the US to support the nonviolent activism that was happening in Palestine, and to acknowledge that that was happening, because otherwise, what were we supporting? And I took the article, I went and met with staffers in Senator Cantwell and Senator Murray's offices, and they took my information, and that was the end of it. I went to Congressman Brian Baird's office, and as I was sitting in the lobby talking to a staffer, the congressman walked through, and then he came back, and he probably recognized me, and we had a very brief conversation. But you know, he asked me, I remember one thing he asked me at the time was, what was I doing to stop, what was Rachel doing to stop the suicide bombings that were happening? Which was a bit of a startling question. And I didn't have a great answer because I wasn't steeped in all of this at the time. But I did say to him that I knew, of course, that she opposed that, but I wasn't sure, you know, what she could do. Anyway, a week later, Rachel was killed. And my daughter, Sarah, was here in our house in Olympia at the time, she contacted friends. Once she had learned what had happened, she called people that she had worked here locally with in government who had connections to DC, knowing that our family would need help. And one of the offices that were contacted was Brian Baird's office, and he called Sarah. And he said, I just have to ask you one question. Was your mother in my office maybe a week ago? And Sarah said, yes, I think she was. And Sarah said, she thought at the moment, she thought the phone had gone dead, but that realized then that he just couldn't speak. And I noticed some extent that he probably thought about what he might have been able to do in that week, because I realized later members of Congress can make calls to the Israeli embassy and places like that. I'm not sure what steps he might have taken that week, but I have a feeling that was on his mind. But he said, I'm taking a red eye. I'll be back in Congress in the morning. I'll be there and ready to support your family, which is what he did. And we, Craig and I flew to DC the night that Rachel was killed. Our son lived in DC. And so the Tuesday morning after she was killed, that's 2 days after, we were in Congressman Baird's office. And I couldn't sleep. And I knew how she felt about the Iraq war, what was coming. Anyway, somehow I sat in my son's house and when I couldn't sleep in the night and wrote. And I took what I wanted to say to Congressman Baird, and he looked at it, and he then sent a staffer to walk with Craig and me to offices, to the North Carolina offices, because that's where we were living, to other Washington State offices. He just had the staffer go with us the entire time. And I think he could tell looking at us. I mean, we might collapse at any moment and not be able to finish that, but we did. And then we were called back. And it's too long a story to tell, but Congressman Baird just continued to be a support and continued to really challenge the Israeli officials that he encountered in the process of trying to get answers to what had happened to Rachel. And he introduced a resolution in the House of Representatives calling for a US investigation, similar to what's happened with Shireen Abu Akleh. And it was a very simple resolution. Condolences to our family, the US and Israel making sure that nothing like this ever happened again, and a US investigation. And so what that did was to allow people throughout the US to go to their members of Congress and say, sign on to this resolution. It brought attention not only to Rachel, but to the Palestinian issue. And I can tell you, when we were in Congress during those early years, there would be, we were sometimes there when a resolution would come up in Congress, on the floor of Congress. It was always in support of the Israeli government. I mean, really critical of Palestine. And it would pass, of course, by a margin of 400 and something to 1 or 2, if that, sometimes unanimous. So for him to step out, I think was really, we were just very fortunate that he was the person that was in that position to support us, because that's what he did. And then through the years, I would just say, he left the Congress, but he was there for many years. And some of you will remember, we woke up one morning and found out that he was in Gaza, that he had traveled there to visit. He made subsequently, I believe it was 4 or 5 visits to Gaza. I think he was maybe the first person in almost a decade to go in. He went the same time that John Kerry went, but Kerry stayed up at one end of Gaza, really didn't see it. Congressman Baird traveled throughout the Gaza Strip, and he came back a changed person. And he is now a really strong advocate here in our region for Palestine, speaks often on the situation, and for Gaza as well, which as a part of Palestine. In terms of the U.S. government, we had, I'll just end by saying we had considerable support. Some of you have heard of Lawrence Wilkerson, who was chief of staff to Colin Powell at the time. And in many ways, he really kept the search for accountability open for us, because he drafted a letter to us that said he could say unequivocally that there had not been a thorough, credible, and transparent Israeli investigation into Rachel's case. And after 2 years, when the statute of limitations was going to run out on what our family could do, because the US was still in that position of saying there had been no credible investigation by Israel, we filed lawsuits. And it took many, many years, of course, to come to the end of that road. And not unexpectedly, in Israel, when we went to court in Israel in Rachel's case, the Israeli courts found no fault, basically, with Israel's behavior, with the military and government's behavior. But what that did was to focus, put a spotlight on how the military functions, how the courts function, and so forth, and are culpable in everything that's happening there to Palestinians. I'm sorry, I know this is pretty disjointed. And I would say, because I know there's been a lot of criticism of the Biden administration and Secretary of State Blinken, and our family had 3 different meetings with Tony Blinken when, and also actually with Biden's staff when he was in Congress, and they were helpful to us. The staff actually, I think, created questions that Biden submitted to the State Department about Rachel's case. And again, those were helpful to us because it laid out what US officials had done in speaking with their Israeli counterparts about Rachel's case. And it indicated basically that they got no response. The bottom line, however, is that our family was put in the position of seeking accountability with support from the US, but when we got to the end of the road, the US took no action or further steps to demand accountability or some kind of responsibility on the part of Israel. So, and I think, we're watching carefully what happens with Shireen Abu Akleh's case. It was shocking to me to hear, I don't know all the details of the case, but that the Israelis chose not to punish in anywhere, to have accountability for what happened with the older gentleman, Omar Assad. But what I do feel, what we did feel with Tony Blinken, was that he did understand the situation and that he did care deeply about our family. He was responsive to our family. Our daughter could email to him directly and did, and got responses. I'll just share that in our last meeting, which was after we had the final outcomes in the trial in Israel, we met with him in the State Department. He was then Assistant Secretary of State, I guess. But he looked at us, and we were worn out, I'll be very honest. And he, particularly Sarah, and she was dealing with health issues. And he looked at us and said, "What do you want me to do?" And I think at that point, Sarah felt, I want you to decide what to do. You know, I don't want us to have to tell you what to do. I just share some of that because I still have some confidence from our encounters with Secretary of State Blinken. He wasn't secretary at the time, but that he wants to do the right thing and that he cares. I saw humanity in him, so I'll end with that. I'm glad to answer questions, any questions people have, but it is a long story.
One of the questions is, in the course of the past 20 years with your involvement, how do you think things are moving in the US? Are things getting better, worse, the same? And
Yeah.
who's being very much outspoken today in government when it comes to Palestine?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's incredibly different than it was 20 years ago. And again, most people in this call probably realize that. I think one thing that I've really noticed recently is that the younger generation of Palestinians, the younger generation generally, but young Palestinians in our community have found their voices and are using them. And I think that's wonderful. But, you know, polls show that the attitude and the feelings about this issue have changed dramatically in the US, and that there's great support. There's much better understanding, I think, of the situation now than there was 20 years ago. Thanks to the work of organizations like Sabeel. Sabeel mentored us. You know, Dick Toll met me for the first time, met Craig and I at a conference, a US campaign conference in Washington, DC in 2003. I see Daryl Myers on the call too, and I imagine Daryl was there as well. Dick said, Dick is in Portland, Oregon, very near us. And he said, I'll be in touch with you. And he was. And then year after year, conference after conference, we were invited, we participated, and we were mentored by extraordinary people that came to those conferences. So I'm so grateful. I think if that hadn't existed, it would have been much harder for us. We needed that education. And also just the encouragement of all the people within Sabeel. And Sabeel in Jerusalem as well, Naeem Atik and others invited us there. So when we came to Israel for various reasons, we went a number of times to Sabeel and met with groups there. And again, the support, Sabeel brought a busload of people to the Supreme Court when we appeared when we were there one time in court. And I can't tell you how much that meant to us, and how important it was to our being able to take the steps that we were able to do. But in terms of the US right now, you know, it's we just heard locally, we had a visit from Father Fadi Diab, who I think works with Sabeel in Jerusalem, and I know is with St. Andrew's Church in Ramallah. And we were in Seattle to meet with him one evening. He spoke for maybe an hour and a half about the current situation and how dangerous it is, and how much we all must engage with it. And he, you know, he just really painted a very detailed picture of the situation right now. And it's hard to hear in a lot of ways, but I do think there is also there's opportunity for all of us in it, because it makes so clear what's happening. And I think that more and more people have very strong questions about our support for this. And I think maybe for the first time, some of the bills that we've been trying to support that Betty McCollum from Minnesota has brought forward, there's actually, I think, some opportunity to maybe push forward some curb on the US funding, which is the one thing that we can work on here. So yes, I think there's a sweeping change in public opinion. And now we just need to find ways to make that translate to US policy. And it's difficult. It's very difficult work, but this is an important time to do it. I think the fact with Shireen Abu Akleh's case that we have now well over 100 people in the US Congress, continuing to sign on and say that there has to be more done. There has to be transparency. We need to see what the reports say and so forth. That's a really important sign about those that are in positions of responsibility who are stepping out on the issue. And we in the Senate, we've had Senators Sanders and the Sanders-Bowman letter about the situation. So there's movement there.
Yeah, earlier this year we had Tony, Shireen's brother, at a Kumi session. I shared also a story of a friend of mine who's also was a Palestinian American who, was killed at he was a student at the Friends Boys School in Ramallah, a Quaker school, Amjad al-Tawil. He was also a young kid when he was killed, tortured and killed by the Israeli army. I also happen to know the family of Omar Saad. I know the family also where Omar was staying. He was staying with the elderly man from Jiljaliyah. It's a small Palestinian village. I think 99% of the people in the village carry US passports. He's in his late 70s. He was at his best friend's house. They were playing cards and having fun. He went home. Police, an Israeli army vehicle stopped him. It was raining, it was cold, it was in the middle of the winter, and they put him on the side of the road for hours. And then they said that they thought that he was sleeping, and they left him there while he had a heart attack and he died. We understand, but when we speak about Palestinians, it's complicated. It's a complicated case, whatever excuses there are. But when we speak about American citizens, young kids, peaceful people, journalists, elderly people, it seems that you've mentioned that it was one of the demands or one of the asks was that this never happens again. It's happening again. And it's not happening with like any person. Sadly, every person is valuable, but we're speaking about people who are very much known, celebrities, well-connected, part of major organizations. It continues to happen. And I don't think that it's... in a way, I feel that there should much more be done in a way, but it's decision makers need to be more ethical in a way and listen to what is already being done and act upon it. Do you have the same frustration or?
Yes, of course. It's painful to see this situation continuing and knowing that we are complicit. We're made complicit by our governments not acting more strongly, and our tax dollars being used to support all of this. I do think, that what we've seen in the last few weeks with, for instance, the one that I really noticed was former Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, speaking out, not saying exactly that we should immediately stop funding this, but saying that yes, it's a problem that there are no conditions to US funding of all of this. And I thought that was remarkable to hear from him. Craig and I met Ambassador Kurtzer, who's in 2003, our first trip to Palestine. We flew into Ben Gurion Airport. A car met us at the airplane and drove us very quickly to his home. He's an Orthodox Jew who celebrates, or Shabbat is a Orthodox Jewish person, so he wouldn't have been able to meet us after sundown. He was kind and cordial. Later, he was, as ambassador, had some responsibility to pursuing information about Rachel's case, and he did that. He later taught at the Wilson School. I don't think that he's there now, but I'm not sure where he is. But he met with my daughter and my sister and niece to talk about Rachel's case for 4 hours one time. It was a terrible stormy day. We were in Pennsylvania, we drove to his office at Princeton, and he waited for us, and he spent about 4 hours with us answering all the questions that we had. But my sense was this was someone who was always very supportive of Israel, that Israel was important to him. But he's now speaking out, as are other ambassadors, about the problem with US funding, and that has to be addressed. I don't know what we'll see develop there, but I think that is the avenue to at least some change for us in the US. I think that is important for us to pursue, and I think now is a moment when it makes sense to do that, because it's so visible what's happening with our support. I guess the other thing, having dealt with a situation like this for so long, and having spent a lot of time in Congress and a fair amount of time in the State Department, and even we met Blinken when he was it was in the White House with as Biden's Middle East person, and also for Obama. And is that a lot does happen behind the scenes, diplomatically. I think sometimes part of the problem is that we don't know what they're saying. And I know that we do have to listen to the words very carefully. I do follow Department of State press briefings often when I'm preparing to do things. I try to hear exactly what they're saying. And I do know that behind the scenes, they do things. So probably more is going on than we are often aware. But I still am frustrated, and you have every reason, you who are living this for so long and day to day, have every reason to be completely frustrated and upset with the lack of response that you're seeing.
I mean, usually people look at frustrations and anger as a negative feeling. They're very good feelings. They're positive feelings. They fuel our work to continue. They give us energy to continue doing the work for justice and peace and try to set things right. We have a question in the chat. I mean, it's Caterpillar is one of the companies that we promote and we encourage through the BDS movement to hold accountable for being part of collective punishment, which is the subject of this week at Kumi now. How helpful was the BDS and the pressure being exposed on Caterpillar? Do you feel? Do you have any insight on this?
We spent some years working with other activists, really, who had led the way to challenging Caterpillar. And as a reminder, it was not because Caterpillar, that there was a piece of Caterpillar equipment that was used and something bad happened with it. It was because Caterpillar was on notice for years from various organizations that their machinery was being used to commit human rights violations. And they continued to make that equipment available. I think it was a very important part of what was happening during those years. It was, I remember being in Peoria with, I don't know, 500 people came from the Midwest to Peoria, Illinois, when Craig and I went to try to meet with the Caterpillar owners and managers, and they wouldn't let us into the building because and when there was a march to the building, and they had on top of buildings around there. My memory is walking up that street and seeing all these armed people, police or security people that they had on top of the buildings as this very peaceful protest walked to the Caterpillar offices. We did write to them. Jewish Voice for Peace and the Sisters of Laredo did a great job of getting speakers inside the Caterpillar's annual meetings. And we were at one in Chicago. Craig and I did end up being able to say a few words there. I remember when we went to Peoria, they said they didn't need to meet with us because we'd written such good letters and explained ourselves so well in our letters. They didn't need to meet with us in person. But I think that the movement felt strong to me at that time, I actually feel that BDS here in the US has struggled and during this past decade. And I even as an organization ourselves, it's been challenging to try to find ways to participate. But I know that internationally, there are still really important things that are happening in that regard. We did one time, Caterpillar was supposed to receive an award in Washington, D.C. It was it was for building and architecture. I'm forgetting about the organization that was giving them the award, but it was quite significant. And we did, with the help of Jewish Voice for Peace, started a campaign to say, no, they shouldn't get that because of how their machines were being used to commit human rights violations. And I remember the day I was sitting in our small office, and one of our staff people, actually someone who worked for Sabio, Rochelle Gauze at the time, walked in, just amazed, because the group that was having this big event to honor Caterpillar had decided they wouldn't present that award to them in person at the event. So we were actually successful in keeping them from going. Caterpillar, I think they gave them the award, but there was no public presentation or ceremony of that. I just remember how almost electrifying it was to have that small victory, and so and there were others here in Olympia. The Olympia Food Co-op, I think, is still the only grocery in the country that took Israeli products off their shelves. And that led to years in court for the co-op board and a couple of boards. And they eventually the whole thing was thrown out. What we saw happen, and what we've seen happen in a lot of cases, is that the opposition went to using legal steps to try to stop the movement, to slow things down. The case originally it looked like it would be completely thrown out of court, but because there was as a slap lawsuit, something just brought to improperly brought forward as a distraction, really. But because that was new Washington state law and there was a question about the law, even though it definitely should have been a slap lawsuit, the co-op boards ended up back in court. Anyway, all of those things have, I think, made it hard to figure out exactly what to do around BDS here. But I do think the work challenging Caterpillar, again, it's education, all of these steps that we take, even when the outcomes aren't what we wish they would be, they have enormous possibility in educating and bringing more people to awareness. And I think that the movement has been successful in doing that.
Unfortunately, there's plenty of questions in the chat, but could you please help us as people from different parts of the world? How can we really help your foundation, support it? And what can we do? Like, how can we, like, it's donations, promoting your work, engaging in your advocacy. So please guide us. How can we really show our love and respect and commitment to you and to the family and to the foundation?
That's so very kind of you. This is our 20th year. So our theme has been Rachel Corey, 20 years, and that the work goes on. We're very small. And, you know, the foundation has gone through all these different phases that I kind of touched on through this 20 years. And so the work we do, what we do changes. We've tried, Craig and I are, you know, we've been permanent volunteers, and we're now 75 and 76 years old, and not aiming to do less work because it's been, and sometimes it's more than full-time work for us, and not entirely healthy. I'm sure you all relate to that. And so trying to find the proper balance for us during this stage in our lives is very important. So we are looking, our board is trying to figure out what is a sustainable future for it. And we have right now just two staff. One is only quarter time, and we have volunteers and we have interns. It's one of the things that keeps me going is once again, post-COVID, we're seeing students that are interested. And one of the highlights of my time with the foundation has been the group of young people that come through from local colleges and elsewhere, some actually from colleges far away, and want to intern with us or volunteer with us, because I think they're our future. So whenever I can do to mentor them a bit, and to support their interests has been really satisfying. And it's hard to step away from that for me. But then I get overwhelmed and I'm not finding that balance. So I guess a lot of it, unfortunately, for nonprofits, and there's so many to support. And I personally, Craig and I try to do what little we can in as many places as we can, because we feel like all these organizations are so important, but it is financial. And it's trying to find the structure and the support to engage, to really, you know, provide people working for us a reasonable living, and to keep that structure in place, because it does take a staff. I think you understand that at Sabio as well. to keep things moving forward. So yes, of course, we welcome financial support to the foundation. We are actually looking for, we've talked about an advisory board and we've never done that. So if there were people interested in participating on an advisory board, that would be something that I think could be helpful to us. We also are now, with being used to Zoom meetings, we are thinking about expanding our local board. We want people to be able to get together, but we know we can take board members from Seattle or Portland or even up and down the coast around our region. And that's another thing that would be helpful. So yeah, for people that are interested in our work and interested in supporting it, we'd be glad to hear from you and to consider how that might be possible. Thank you for asking the question.
No, we'd love to help. I commit personally to helping out. I'm sure Sabil is, and I'm sure many people who are already on this call will do. So by Sunday, hopefully, or maybe before, we send out a newsletter with the recording of this session that goes to the wider list of Sabil or Kumi now people who have registered. So if you could send us by Sunday, just like 3 or 4 bullet points of things that that we can actually do, that would be extremely appreciated, and we can promote this as Sabil, but also as the different friends of Sabil. You can send it to Ryan at Kumi now. I just want to I want to thank you. I want to also to thank all of the people who have been with us in this meeting. Every week we send out the Kumi action, and the Kumi action is to challenge companies that are supporting the Israeli army with and the Israeli police with weapons and products that are used for collective punishment, whether it is tear gas or other tactics. Sadly, these companies sell to many police stations around the world. Please do engage your own police station at your local city or at your local town and ask if they're using this company that is breaching international law. Definitely, we're not only friends with the Corey family, we are family. That's at least how we see ourselves. And it's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you for being up early in the morning. I'm sorry we did not address all of the questions in the email, but I'm sure we will meet again with the foundation, and I hope that we will be able to support it in tangible ways. In solidarity, as we all strive to live in a better world, to do justice and to show mercy together as one people, building bridges among each other. May God bless your foundation. May God bless your family. May God bless you and all of the people who are working with you. See you next week, friends. And next week is on Indigenous rights, and we have special speakers. And thank you all, and God bless you.